Hey, Jason, this is Brandon. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate you. The last time I saw you was at our powerlifting meet.
hmm
You and the wife did really good. So good to see you guys then. Obviously, you've had some changes since then, now being at Mooresville High School doing strength and conditioning. So to kind of just kick things off, just give everybody a brief background of kind of how you got into strength and conditioning, where you've been during your career, and then, now obviously your current responsibilities at Mooresville.
Yeah. So originally, what got me into strength and conditioning was, as a kid, as an athlete myself, I figured out at an early age, I would say probably middle school, the stronger and faster I got, the better I got at my sports. My main sport was always football, but I also dabbled in some baseball and wrestling as well. And I noticed, especially with the wrestling part, the stronger, more explosive I was, better I got at wrestling, stronger, more explosive, faster. Was always, always helped me, excel on the football field. So that was always something that's kind of what got me started. And then I started watching like the old World's Strongest Man videos with Bill Kazmaier and all those guys. So I'd be up late, probably later than what I was supposed to be as a kid watching those, if you remember, on ESPN
Oh, yeah.
and watching those guys. And so strongman was always something that I had a goal of myself since I was a little kid that I wanted to compete in. Fast forward to college, I went to Indiana State. Originally, goal was to be a football player. And that got me to Indiana State. Once I got there, was playing football, decided being a strength coach was what I wanted to do. So started interning in the weight room there with the strength coach at the name. It was Kip Heitrick. First hired me as an intern there during undergrad. And then I kind of parlayed that into a graduate assistant there at Indiana State. Once my master's degree was done, I had an opportunity to go work in the private sector. So I did that for about 8 years. At first I was working for someone else, and then I ended up opening my own facility after about a year and a half. So spent a little over 7 years owning my own facility here on the west side of Indianapolis. And then during that time, I also got back into coaching. I was working at Danville High School in the afternoons and on weekends. I was their first strength and conditioning coach that they hired. It was all coach led, like sport coach led prior to that. So I was the first strength and conditioning coach. I did that for a couple of years. And then that really kind of reignited that passion, I think, for wanting to do it in the public sector. Then I got an opportunity to go back to Indiana State as a full-time assistant. So I took that opportunity. I wasn't there very long before Whiteland High School came around. They offered me a really good opportunity to go there. So I went to Whiteland High School, was there for 4 years. I really liked it at Whiteland. I still talk to all the people there. Matter of fact, we just played them on Friday night, so it was kind of bittersweet for us because we won. But you're beating your friends. So like I said, it was kind of bittersweet for me, but we won. And anyways, once I was at Whiteland, I had the opportunity to go work for Chip Ganassi Race teams. So I was a strength and conditioning coach for Chip Ganassi Race teams for about a year, it was an awesome experience. It's a really cool job. But Mooresville made me a really good offer, and they built some brand new facilities. And so here I am here at Mooresville. So over the course of, I'd say I'm on year 17 now of my career, I've worked with everything from, middle school athletes to soccer moms to, the public setting, private setting. Worked with a couple NFL hopefuls, an NFL draft pick, power lifters, and anything in between there, I feel like. So I've been kind of a jack of all trades in my career so far.
Yeah. You've definitely been everywhere. I feel like I've seen a lot of it transpire, and it's been cool to watch you not only take on those positions, but it looks like they've all went incredibly well since you've taken them. And I know Whiteland for sure made a lot of progress while you were there, and now you're at Mooresville and the new facilities that they got there. I've seen the pictures and stuff online. It's really incredible what they've done there. And then for the racing, that's something that really got me intrigued about that. Can you kind of explain what it's like to work in the racing world as a strength and conditioning coach. And I think a lot of people know that racing's got a lot of money involved. There's with all the sponsorships and TV views and everything like that. Like they've got the ability to afford good quality strength and conditioning coaches. And I don't think many people know that that's even an opportunity that actually exists. I don't think many people think that there is a strength and conditioning coach involved in that sector. But then, what does that job look like? I mean, I don't even me, I'm trying to think, I don't know exactly what a day-to-day job looks like for a strength and conditioning coach at the racing level.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple different, it's done differently in different organizations. So with NASCAR is completely different from IndyCar. With NASCAR, with their pit stops, the rules are different. So with NASCAR, I believe they're only allowed to have 2 guns over the wall, wheel guns, whereas IndyCar, you're allowed to have 4. And so that changes the dynamic of the pit stop when you've got 4 guys that can take wheel nuts off versus 2. The NASCAR guys have to run around the car. So they've got to be a lot more agile than, say, our IndyCar pit crew members. So a lot of times what they will do is they will take former D1 athletes. So let's say you're a football player. Let's say you play linebacker or tight end at IU, or even like baseball guys. They'll take shortstops, center fielders, people like that. And they will, if that's a guy who couldn't move on to the next level. So let's say I'm a D1 baseball player and I can't move on to play Major League Baseball, just because my ability or whatever, right? And say the same thing with like your football player, he can't move on to the NFL because of ability or, whatever injury history or whatever is preventing them from going to the NFL. Well, they can have an opportunity to still pursue an athletic career in doing pit stops. So what they will do is they will recruit those guys and they will come in, and your job, if you're a NASCAR pit crew member, is you come in the morning, you do your treatment. They have athletic trainers there on site. You'll lift. And then from there on, you're doing pit stop practice, and that's your entire day. Right. And so they'll hire a strength coach, like me or you, to come build that program. IndyCar is a little different. They don't have the budget that NASCAR does. A lot of times the pit crew members are also the mechanics or the truck drivers. That said, they're also stationary. So they have 4 guns over the wall. So you're just changing 1 tire. Whereas, like I said, in NASCAR, you're having to run around the car. So they're pretty much stationary. They get their spot. The car pulls in, they change the tires. As a strength and conditioning coach in IndyCar, it becomes a lot more keeping them healthy, and keeping them in shape and keeping them going throughout the rigors of having to be a mechanic at the track and the travel schedule, and keeping them healthy enough to where they can continue changing tires. The difference is, like at NASCAR, you might have a guy in his early 20s who just finished college, where these IndyCar mechanics are usually quite a bit older. They've had to work their way up to get there. For them, that's the pinnacle of their career. They may have started out, with sprint cars, working on that, and or drag racing or something like that, and work their way up, to where they're now a mechanic at the IndyCar level. So for them, that's the top of the pile, right? So it takes them a little bit of time to get there. So you're dealing with a lot more 35 to 45-year-olds who are still out there changing tires and having to travel and do all of the other things. So as a strength and conditioning coach, your focus is more on general fitness, and I don't want to say injury prevention, because you're really not preventing much. If they get out there and they get hit by a car, there's nothing that you can do about it. Yeah. But your goal is to keep them healthy and reduce the amount of injuries. Most of what you will see at the IndyCar level will be like overuse stuff. So we get a lot of overuse elbows, shoulders, wrists, low backs, and things like that. I also worked on the sports car side for Chip Ganassi race teams. So with them, you see a completely different thing, because it's more like NASCAR in that they have to run around the car. They're only allowed to have 2 guns. But the wheels are a lot heavier. So an IndyCar, the rear tire is about 40 pounds. On the sports car side, so these are the cars that do like the 24 hours of Le Mans.
Yep.
Those tires are close to 100 pounds.
Wow.
and they're having to place those, and they have to run around the tire. So that means they're bending over with 100 pounds, whereas our IndyCar pit crew are on their knees changing the tires. So whereas we saw a lot of elbows and shoulders with IndyCar because they're, I don't see if you can see me, you're muscling the tire on there. With our sports car guys, they're having to bend and place the tire and then put it on. So we saw a lot more low backs and stuff like that with our sports car side. But you're still dealing with like the rigors of the travel because those guys are also mechanics. And so like on the sports car side, like when they go do Le Mans, the 24-hour race, they don't have a cutoff for their garage hours. And so that's something that you need to keep in mind because the strength coach is also helping them with the nutrition side of things and hydration and all of that stuff too. So they may be working till 11 or 12 o'clock at night at the track and then turn around back at the track at like 5 a.m. the next day. So when they go to France for like 2 weeks for Le Mans, they're working, you know what I mean? So how do you help them deal with being in a foreign country, making sure they have the food that they need, any sort of hydration that you can help with, anything that you can give them as far as soft tissue work or whatever. And just basically the goal is to just keep them going throughout that 2 weeks. Because at the end of that 2 weeks, they've been putting in, 12, 15, sometimes 18-hour days. And then at the end of that, you got to go do a 24-hour long race where you're changing tires every hour. So it can be a lot, but like I said, it's more about, it's kind of a difference where, in NASCAR, you're worried more about performance and how fast they can get it done. With IndyCar and sports cars, you're worried about keeping the guys healthy so that they don't make mistakes and so that we don't have to replace them with someone, so that they can keep the team together and finish the season. So it's a little bit different mindset, from the two different types of things. So as the strength and conditioning coach, whether you're working with, the sports car side or the IndyCar side, you're also helping out being the pit stop coach. So my job to, I guess, fully answer your question. So like my job, the first half of the day, I would have the guys coming in groups. So, and they would typically come in with their car group. So with Ganassi, it was the 8, 9, 10, and 11 car, right? So it's, Marcus Erickson's group, Scott Dixon's group, Alex Pillow's group. And then it was Jimmy Johnson when I first got there, and then Marcus Armstrong for this season. You would have them come in with their car group. So they would come in, they'd get a 45-minute lift in, and you would rotate the groups through and have the IMSA teams come in. And then after lunch, we would typically do a pit stop practice where we had a practice car in the truck bay and you're just practicing just like any other team would, and you're videotaping each practice. So we would have, a couple different camera angles set up. And then, my job is to help with film breakdown after that, just like any other sports team would. So at the racetrack, you're also helping with film breakdown. So my job at the racetrack would be to set up an overhead camera and a front view camera for each pit box. And so when we would have a pit stop, the guys would perform their pit stop. I would videotape from those two angles. And then we had, software to where they could come back over the wall as soon as the pit stop was over, and then we're watching it right there during the race, so they would get immediate feedback if something messed up or whatever, and what changes they need to make for the next pit stop. So it's really high energy, really fast paced work environment. Like I said, it was a really cool opportunity for me. So I'm really glad I got the opportunity to do that, and won an Indy 500 while I was there. So that was real cool. So like I said, a really fun job. Really enjoyed the work of that. So
yeah, I get it. Sounds a lot. Sounds like a good mix, knowing your background with football and strongman. I mean, moving stuff around in weird positions, carrying it, having to still be fast yet efficient, but at the same time, using film to get real life feedback, just like we see on Saturdays when teams come off the field, or even on Sundays with NFL, they get a iPad or whatever to check out what they were doing wrong, and then really make those changes on the field. So that's kind of cool. I didn't realize it was that detailed. So I guess from that, going, now that you're back in the high school conditioning realm, what does your position now entail? I want to say I understand that you're the head guy there now at Mooresville, but you also said now that you've also got somebody that helps you with the speed and agility component. So I guess how does that dynamic work? And then, on top of what you kind of talked about, I guess, yesterday at the NSCA clinic, how do you guys work together using that speed and agility program around what you're doing in the weight room with a day-to-day go of high school kids that are 14 to 18?
Mm-hmm. So here at Mooresville, we've got 500 kids in our APC program, which is really pretty impressive considering it's a school of 1,500. So that means we've got a third of the population in here in the weight room. So it's a really awesome opportunity for Bram and I. We have 2 strength coaches here. Well, I mean, so technically my job title is strength and conditioning coach. His job title is strength and speed coach. So in my mind, strength, speed, conditioning, all those things have to work together anyways, seamlessly. You can't have, one mindset for your speed training that you're doing and then have something completely different philosophy or whatever for the strength training part of you do. For me, those things kind of mesh together. Right. So he oversees more of the speed component, but I mean, like I said, we have to be, communicative and things like that about what they're doing. Because at the end of the day, we're both strength coaches. So typically what we do is basically we hash out, before, the week before or whatever, what the plan is, long-term and short-term of what we're going to do both, for next week and next month. And you know how it is when you're trying to put together a year-round program. So he kind of oversees that, and then I kind of oversee the strength part, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to let him have some input on what we're doing. He absolutely has input on what we're doing from the strength side, just like I have input on what we're doing from the speed side. So far, it's been really good having someone else to bounce ideas off of and things like that, that's there with you every day, that's working with the same kids. In the past, everywhere I've been like the guy, right? Kind of similar to what you've been in most of your career, where you're the one making the decisions. You're the one doing all the programming. This way, I feel like you have an opportunity to have someone else to, look at things from maybe a different perspective, or, because we each have our own biases.
Right. Yep.
No matter how good of a coach you try to be, everybody's going to have their thing. And I feel like I kind of get stuck in a rut of what I do. Like, this is what I've always done. This is the way that I do it. I've been doing it for almost 20 years now. And having him, especially, a guy as young as him, he's 28, to kind of bring some new energy and some new ideas and things like that have been really good so far. And, overall, I think that Mooresville is just a really great place. Our administration obviously is bought into what we're doing. We've got a 7,500 square foot weight room. I've got all brand new Sorinex. So I've got 8 double-sided Sorinex racks. So I've got 16 racks. Each one of those racks has Elite Form on them that we use so we can track bar velocity, power outputs, work, rets. We can do a lot with the Elite Form. We've got the Vald system with the timing gates. We've got force platforms. You name it. So far, our administration has not said no to Bram or I yet. So maybe we're just not asking for enough. But everything that we've wanted, they find a way to get it done. It just shows how dedicated they are to this whole thing. And they know that, having a third of your students in one class, the think about the impact that you can have in the culture of your school as a whole from that.
Right.
So they are certainly bought in, and that's nice.
Yeah, cool. So I guess with the speed and the agility component, I guess it's football season, so we'll take football here as an example. I want to say you guys are probably 6 games in, so there's a couple left probably about a month left before sectionals hits. When you guys are lifting in season, what does that look like for your guys' schedule? Obviously, games are on Friday nights. How does the speed and agility training coalesce with the strength and conditioning, like on a weekly schedule, I guess, in season?
For our in-season kids, we mainly focus on the linear speed. Our kind of thought process is that they're typically getting the change of direction that they need from practice. They're out there doing that every day during practice. As long as if they're going full speed in practice, which they are, then they're getting a ton of volume cutting, changing directions, things like of that nature. So what we focus on from the speed and agility standpoint is mostly linear speed. We do change of direction typically after school. So our off-season athletes come in after school. So that's a good way to get the change of direction work in with them. So that means in class, we're focusing on linear speed because that's when I've got most of my in-season kids, right? Obviously, the in-season kids are not coming after school. So that's the kind of the focus there. We're in kind of a different situation now because Bram was actually able to start in June working here at Mooresville just because of the way his teaching contract worked out. They weren't able to start me until August. So basically I started in season. So that's the worst time to start, as a strength and conditioning coach is in season. So, but that's kind of the way it was. So, so as far as from a strength program, perspective, we would mainly, front squat at this point. We haven't introduced back squats yet. Not that I'm anti back squats, because certainly I'm not. But I try to focus on things that we can do in the weight room that are easy for them to recover from, because you have to keep in mind, they still have to go to practice after school. So I don't want to destroy them in the weight room and then they can't perform at practice. That needs to be the goal. I'm a big Dan John fan, and he always says, keep the goal, right? So football, volleyball, soccer, those are the goals right now with our fall season. So, so to answer your question, we focus on things that they can do and recover in enough time to be able to go to practice afterwards and not take away from the game. So as far as our schedule looks like, I usually like to keep Mondays pretty fast and light. From my experience, if you're trying to do any sort of top speed or acceleration work on Mondays, it usually doesn't go very well just because kids are either playing in tournaments or doing whatever all weekend. Let's say I'm a football player. Okay, well, I played on a football game Friday night, and then I probably didn't get to bed early. I might have to go play in the JV game Saturday morning because our kids are allowed 5 quarters a week. So if you play 2 quarters of the varsity game, you can still get 3 quarters in the JV game on Saturday, right? So a lot of them will do that. And then you got to remember they're high school kids. And I don't know what you were like in high school, but I was probably not going to bed on time on Saturday night. I was hanging out with my friends, staying up late, doing that kind of thing. And then, you're doing whatever on a Sunday. And then here you are Monday morning in APC class. So I found that we are the fastest actually on Tuesday. So my Mondays is usually, like I said, a little bit lighter lift. Like we might bench on Mondays, do some upper body work. We will save our speed work for Tuesdays. So Tuesdays we are either working on acceleration or top end speed. We'll typically rotate those. I know that a lot of people will make the argument that, a lot of field sport athletes don't really need to focus on top speed because they rarely hit it. But from everything I've read and my own personal experience, working on top speed is the tide that rises all the boats. I've never seen someone with a fast top speed who is slow at accelerating. I'll put it that way. Yep. So improving top speed improves, rate of force development and all those other properties. So whether they hit top speed or not, during their game is kind of irrelevant, because I think that it's important because it improves a lot of other qualities. And then from there, we'll hit our either top speed or acceleration on Tuesdays. From there, we'll get our heavy lower lift in on Wednesdays. And then from there, it's kind of, it may be week to week on what we do on Thursday and Friday. It depends on where we're at in the season and what we're doing. So Thursday could be another speed day. It could be another upper body day. Not that I'm a huge upper lower split guy, because I feel like, athletes do kind of need total body. But it just helps us with organization, really.
Yeah.
And then by the time Friday rolls around, we're it's either a fast Friday or some sort of competition, or if we haven't gotten to lift, because we got like other stuff you got to think about when you're working in the school setting, like we have quarterly exams next week, so our schedule is going to be off. So that's going to change our program because of our schedule being changed. So a lot of times it's fast Fridays where we might actually time something. So if we're going to time a fly 10, if they're in season, we probably won't time a 40, obviously, especially for football. I'm not going to have them running 40s the day of the game.
Yeah.
For lots of reasons. I don't know that it'll necessarily hurt them, But what happens if they run a slow 40, as a 10th of a second slower or whatever, that happens, but then they're going to be in their head mentally all day and they got to play a football game. So I don't want to do that. So we might do a fly 10, or we might do some sort of competitive sprint where we're not timing them. Usually what we'll do is we'll split them up. We might have upperclassmen go do that. Our underclassmen, I shouldn't say lower, the underclassmen, freshmen and sophomores, typically I'll take them back into the weight room. I feel like that's where we can make the most improvement with them, just because I've got freshmen who've never even touched a weight before. So they need a little bit more time for development. So that's why it's nice having two strength coaches where we can divide and conquer. So he'll take them, the upperclassmen sometimes, go time some fly 10s or fly 20s or something like that. And then I'll have freshmen and sophomores in the weight room with me. We're just working on technique, fundamentals, and things like that for those kids.
Cool. And I guess now that you've got all the technology at your hands, I'm not sure if this is do you have that stuff at Whiteland?
No.
Okay, so this is your first year, it sounds like, with that. How is it going using force plates and elite form and all that?
It's nice. I mean, our force plates that we have, we can measure mod RSI. Obviously, we can measure vertical jump. But the one thing that we really like is contract time, like how fast they can turn from the eccentric portion of a jump to the concentric port. And what we've just noticed, just anecdotally, like I don't have any research to back it up, but just anecdotally, our best athletes can contract the fastest. And that's one thing that we can measure with our force plates. So just being able to dial in our training a little bit more for our more advanced kids. Now, that doesn't say that we're doing that kind of stuff with our freshmen and sophomores, because we're not. They need to focus more on fundamentals and not worry so much about RSI and things like that. They need to know, can I squat or can I do a push-up? You know what I mean? So it's really helpful having two of us there to be able to do that, like I touched on earlier. I like using the elite form we use it right now for our front squats, our bench, and our hang cleans is really about all we're using it for so far. I like it because it puts a governor on them too. Right now, if I keep it set at 0.7 meters per second for their peak velocity, that means that they're not going to be able to grind, if you know what I mean. And if you've ever seen a teenager grind out a lift that, they're really struggling to hit that last rep, you've seen what their technique starts to look like, right? So it starts to go bad, right? So what I can do with that is I can say, okay, well, as soon as you fall below this threshold for whatever lift it is, then the set is over, right?
Yep.
And you either have to lighten the weight or you have to move it faster. So it allows me to, like I said, put a governor on so I don't have kids grinding out reps week in and week out. We can keep the bar speed up this way, and it gives them it also gives them kind of a challenge. Like the kids are competitive. They want to compete. So if me and you got the same weight on the bar, I'm going to try and move it faster than you. Yep. Right. Type of thing. So it allows me to also do that. It also allows us to dig a little bit more into the kids' recovery. So typically what we'll do with our force plates is, we've only got one set. So obviously I've got my group sizes are 75 to 90. So I can't do everybody. Right. But what I can do is I can take like a small sample of kids from each sport. So let's say we might do football next week. I can take some of our varsity guys. I can measure their mod RSI. And that kind of gives me a little input as far as how their recovery is going. So we might notice week to week, little changes in their RSI. And we notice if their RSI is going down, right, week to week, then we need to make some modifications because they're not recovering from their game. So we've been able to do that. Like, so, last week, for example, we noticed across the board about a 4% drop in RSI, reactive, strength index. So what we were to do, we were to change the training up a little bit, keep them a little bit more fresh. And then they came in and balled out on Friday against Whiteland. And, didn't look tired, they came out fresh and hard. So that's the thing that we're able to do. And we can, kind of keep tabs on them that way versus at every other place I've been, whether it was Danville or Whiteland, I just had to use my coach's eye. I would just say, during their warm up, do they look sluggish? And then it's kind of subjective in your opinion on what they're thinking versus hard data. And that's what that allows us to do.
Yeah. So when you say you have 75 to 90 kids, is that in your average class throughout the day in your APC? Do you have that many kids in one class?
Yeah. Our smallest class is 75.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. You got to have your stuff together.
Yeah. So I guess with that many, kind of leads me to this question I was had it anyways, but with that many kids, obviously, are the classes designed where in 1 hour it's all football, or do you have a mix of a variety of athletes all day?
We try to do that. So our first period is football.
Okay.
But there, to fill up the class, we've got some baseball players and some non-athletes in there. But I would say 90% of that class is football. Okay. But just because of schedules, we've got kids that are on kind of work study programs where they might have a job where they work half day, and the school does that, or they go to, I think it's called Area 31. I'm not sure. They have a different name for it at Whiteland, but I can't remember what it was. It's basically like if you want to take, automotive mechanics or construction or cosmetology or whatever, there's a different school that they will actually leave campus and go to. I'm sure, most high schools are doing that now.
Yeah.
Where they either bus them over there or they can drive themselves. So we've got a lot of football players that do that, which means that they may not be able to be in that first period class because they also have to get their other required classes in that might conflict in it. But they do try to do that. Like I said, with football at Whiteland, we did that. At Whiteland, football had its own class. We had about 85 in there, and it was just football. We also had a swimming and basketball class, and we also had a baseball, softball class while I was at Whiteland. And that made it a lot easier for me. Not because we do anything really sports specific. I don't think at the high school level you need that. Kids just generally need to get stronger, faster, more athletic. But it would allow me to organize it a little bit differently around their game schedule. And so if the whole class has a game on a Thursday, that makes it a lot easier to organize than if you've got 5 dudes who have a class on a Thursday and then the other 70 kids don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So just from an organization standpoint and your training, it makes that a lot easier. Like I said, at Mooresville, we do have that with football right now, but that's the only one. Okay. I'm not saying that we won't in the future. That's kind of how it was when I got to Whiteland too. And then once I got to know the administration a little bit better and they got to kind of see how I operate, they started giving me a little bit more input on the class schedule. And that's what I'm kind of anticipating to happen here.
Yeah, cool. So with your other classes outside of football, when you've got different sports, are those kids all still running very similar training programs, or do you have like a baseball specific, a softball specific, where I don't say they're off doing their own thing, but they're almost in like, I guess, mini pods of their sport, or are they just doing the same general program if they're in the off season?
If they're in the off season, it's probably going to be pretty similar. But I do make some changes just for some athletes, just because of what they go through. Like, baseball, softball, for example, they just had a little small like fall season. Yep. Right. So some of them, they were playing fall ball. We also have safety squat bars from Elite FCS here. I also have, I call them Swiss bar, football bars, whatever, neutral grip bench press bars, and things like that I will use. And again, it's not because I think that high schoolers need sports specific training, but I also do want to do what I can to mitigate any sort of injuries. Not that they're going to injure themselves, but hopefully you guys get what I'm trying to say. So for the last probably month, I've had all of our baseball and softball players squatting with a safety squat bar versus a regular bar. Like I said, we haven't introduced back squats yet, just because we're getting there. So all we've been doing is front squats. So I remember when I played baseball, how sore my shoulder was. The last thing I would want to do is get into a front squat position and a front rack position. So I made that modification for our baseball and softball, just because we get a lot of sore shoulders and elbows, during that time. So I had them safety squat bar. We can have them use the neutral grip bench bar. So instead of a clean, they might do a clean pull. Instead of a front squat, we might do a safety squat bar. Instead of a bench press, we might either do dumbbells or a neutral grip bench. And it's just to keep that stress off of their off of their joints while they're in season. So I do make those changes for them as far as our in-season kids go. They're going to do that. I do a lot more trap bar deadlift with our in-season kids than I would like squatting, just because I can take out the eccentric part that way. And so the recovery would be a little bit quicker.
Cool. Yep. I think I agree 100% there. We do a lot of the same stuff with a lot of our baseball, softball kids that basically seems like they play year round. It makes it really, really hard to manage those stresses whenever their shoulders are constantly banged up.
Yeah.
So I think you kind of rolled into my next question here with, I guess, just in general, this is more of a philosophy based question than just saying for specifically for any sport. But, when you're looking at phases of seasons, regardless of what sport's in play, what are you looking at a seasonality perspective, from an off season to a preseason to in season to a postseason? How do you and Graham sit down, look at stuff and say, this is what our goal is going to be for this type of season for these athletes?
So we haven't had an off season here yet. Typically during the off season, that's, my time to kind of rewind a little bit. And by that, I mean, dial it back as far as, okay, at the beginning of the off season, we're going to work on taking a step back and focusing in, dialing in our technique. So we might take a week or two with those kids and not even have a barbell in their hands, and have it be more of like a Charlie Francis type, unstructured, recovery period for a couple weeks off during the season, where they're still working out, they're still going to get something out of it, but it might be something completely different than what they've been doing. We can dial in technique and things like that on the off season, and then, start ramping up the volume, towards, probably about 3/4 of the way through the off season, while we're still making some strength improvements. And then we can kind of change our focus to get more strength and power improvements as the season gets closer into preseason. During the season, I'm not one of those maintenance guys. I'm not a guy that's going to try to write a program for maintenance during the season. I feel like if you're doing that, then you're not making any progress. I feel like there's still progress that we can make during the season. You just have to be careful about how you go about it, because I don't want to negatively affect the recovery either. So we will still progress our lifts during the season. It just may be through lower volume. Is kind of how I do it. I'm not really like I understand. I've studied a lot of block periodization, but I really like concurrent a little bit better, just because I feel like we can improve on multiple qualities at once. That doesn't mean that we're not going to focus on one thing or the other. I look at training as more like a dimmer switch. If you're familiar with a dimmer switch, like in a house, right? It doesn't completely turn the lights off. It just adjusts them, right? So, during the off season, we might be working on some strength and hypertrophy, but that doesn't mean that power is going to be completely phased out, because it will still be there. It just might mean lesser attention, lesser volume dedicated to that. I think that you only have so much you can do. And so if you want to improve on one thing, you're going to have to give a little bit somewhere else. But that doesn't mean you completely shut that thing off. So it's like same thing, during the season. We're still going to work on power output. Obviously we're still going to work on maintaining strength, but we're still going to do a little bit of hypertrophy with our assistance work. So that never completely goes away.
Gotcha. And to dive into that a little bit more, what when you're with the concurrent training, I guess, let's just take like a regular day in the weight room for you guys. When a group comes in, what does that look like? I guess for my first question before you, how long do you have? I'm assuming it's probably like 40-ish minutes, probably.
Yeah, 38.
38 minutes. Okay, so you got 38 minutes.
Yeah.
What does that look like from a coaching perspective? I think if anybody's listening, 38 minutes, you got to be on your stuff.
Right.
You got to be dialed in. So I guess what does your day look like when the kids walk in? What do you guys, from a warm-up perspective to your main movements to when they walk out the door?
So we have rack assignments. So the kids get 4 minutes to get dressed. So as soon as the bell rings, they're in the locker room. When the bell rings, they're changed. They have 4 minutes to get to the rack. Our locker rooms are kind of down the hall a little ways. It probably takes them about 30 seconds to get from the locker room door to their rack, right? So at that 4-minute mark, we have them in rack assignments. So Coach Wood, Bram Wood is his name. He takes one set of racks. I take the other. I walk down through there, and then I can just count. I know if I've got 6 kids to a rack, I can just look, see if one kid's missing or whatever, and we put in attendance that way, because you got to put in attendance and do all the school stuff too, right?
Yep.
So first thing we do is that. Once we've got attendance put in, then we have a little pre-block that we go through. That depends on what we're going to do for the day. So if it's more of a lower focused day, then we might do some hip mobility, some ankle mobility, and then some activation work in our pre-block. So we use, Google Slides. We can put those up on the TVs. They'll go through their pre-block. It'll take them 3 to 5 minutes, knock that out, and then we get rolling with our program. So like for tomorrow, for example, Monday, it's going to be actually, I don't want to call it a deload week. It's just a week I usually run 3-week cycles. And then a week after that, I just do something completely different, right? For a week, just to give their bodies just a little different stimulus. So for next week, for example, we're going to go some hang cleans on the elite form. We're going to go a little lighter, focus on speed. So we're going to be at 1.2 meters per second on the cleans. So for those, I won't assign a weight. So what I will do is I will just assign a speed, right? And so whatever weight you can use to hit that speed is what we want to do. So we go over that with the kids at the beginning. They'll have 2 blocks. Usually we just do an A block, B block. I would take the kids and I try to make sure that those 2 blocks don't interfere with one another. So if A block has a hang clean in it, then that means we might be able to bench press in B block, right? Because I'll split the kids in half. Have half the kids go start on bench, have half the kids start on hang cleans, and then they switch. That way we can get them both in. If everybody started on A block, then we're not going to get the whole lift in. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I try to when we design the workout, I try to make 2 blocks that won't interfere with each other. So that means, we're probably not going to squat on the same day we do cleans, right? Because I don't want to squat and then go try to clean.
Yep.
Or do anything explosive after that. So we get that done. Then they can go till about the 7-minute mark, to where 7 minutes are left in class. We turn the music off. It's time to clean up. And then they get 4 minutes to go get dressed before the bell rings. And awesome. So we've got to be a well-oiled machine.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that when you first came in, was that something that you guys had to establish, or was that something that was already somewhat established there and you modified it, or is this something complete from scratch? You're like, hey, this is how we're going to do this. And obviously they, I'm sure, took it on pretty easily is what it sounds like, but I'm curious if that was something that you had to establish yourself.
Not really. They had strength coaches here before us who have a similar philosophy, Craig and Chris. They've moved on to Avon and are the strength and conditioning coaches there in a similar setup. So they have probably more similarities than differences from what I do. So for as far as the kids' perspective, it was not like a whole new thing. Now, some of the things are different. Like I'm not a big fan of like maxing out with teenagers. So that was something that they did, which, right or wrong, whatever. I'm not gonna debate that with them, but it's just not something I care to do. I feel like we can track strength improvements with sub maxes, and so we do that. So there's little differences that the kids are getting used to. Philosophy wise, but as far as that setup, no, that was pretty easy to, hit the ground running with.
Cool. And I think I like you said that you don't max out a whole lot. I'm not a big fan of that either. I'm like you can track the sub-maximal weights, and the sub-maximal weights are improving in the right direction, then as a whole, your program's improving in the right direction. A 1 rep max isn't going to necessarily give you any more data than you weren't getting. And I think if you've got the elite form too, even if you've got, bar speeds on particular weights, if the speed is the same and the weight is increasing on the exercise that you're doing, then that obviously also shows improvement from a performance perspective. So, I mean, it seems like you guys have enough technology that you don't have to 1 rep max to be able to go to the coaching staff and say, well, this is how things are progressing. So we're doing well. And it sounds like, I'm assuming your football coaches are obviously on board too, then, if that's what you guys are doing, which is awesome.
Yeah. Football coach, Mike Gillen, he's really kind of hands off with it. And I don't mean that in a bad way or a negative way. He's just kind of like, you do your job, I'll do my job. And that's completely fine.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of his perspective. He's like, I don't try to interfere with what you guys do. He's like, you guys are professionals. I'm going to let you handle it. So that's been great so far.
Cool. And then I guess my final question, because I feel like high school strength conditioning is obviously becoming more popular. I feel like especially in our state, Indiana, I'm sure, as you know, Terre Haute is still behind. There's still not strength coaches in the weight rooms. So essentially that's led myself and Adrian to kind of take that on our own hands, where we did a little seminar for the sport coaches that wanted it. And it was literally, we did everything from a hands-on part to a lecture part. And the turnout was abysmal. I was pretty disappointed that out of 60 coaches in Terre Haute, if not more, only 4 showed up. Like, that's pretty bad. But I guess you've seen both things, what do you think is going to take for more high schools to buy into strength and conditioning? Do you think resources are the ultimate issue, or do you believe education is the ultimate issue, or maybe the low staffing, the low ability to get teachers and coaches to be able to have like an APC class that are dual qualified to be able to do that? I guess, what are your thoughts there?
I think the continue growing it, especially in Indiana, I think the National High School Strength and Conditioning Association is doing a good job of, continuing to grow the strength and conditioning profession, and just to have an organization that kind of represents all strength coaches and puts us, sets us apart as professionals. I feel like that's the big thing that's holding a lot of places back, is they don't see strength coaches as professional coaches. They kind of see it as a gym teacher who happens to do that, or the football coach who happens to, the guy might have lifted some weights while he was in high school, or, whatever, or played college football or whatever. So all of a sudden he's now the expert. Right. And I feel like that's where you get with a lot of your smaller schools. I think competition will help with that. Because I think that with schools that don't have dedicated strength coaches or a strength and conditioning program in place, they're going to continue to lose ground to the schools that do. They're going to have a harder and harder time every year being competitive. Like Terre Haute North, Terre Haute South, for example, they're having to compete with us. They play us. They play Mooresville. They play Whiteland. They play Danville. They play Avon. And those are, schools who have hired strength and conditioning professionals and have invested in it. And I think that it'll just take more and more education from the higher up, or towards the higher ups, of getting the word out and letting them see the value in having a dedicated strength and conditioning coach who, not only cares about the athletes, but is knowledgeable and has the experience to do it. I feel like high school strength and conditioning coaching is kind of the new frontier in strength and conditioning, because you're actually starting to get like higher paying jobs. I'm making more here at Mooresville than I ever did at Indiana State, and I was a Division I strength coach.
Yep.
But Mooresville's paying me more here. And you're starting to see that a lot. I mean, there's a lot of, I can name, I think, at least 3 strength coaches here in the state that are making 6 figures, working for a high school.
Yeah.
And it's going to get more and more competitive. I mean, right now I'm sitting in Mooresville's weight room, and, they've put almost 7 figures in this weight room, and we've got, like I said, a third of the student body in here. Like I said, it's going to get tougher and tougher for schools who aren't doing that to compete. And I know that, some administrators don't see the value in athletics, but I can tell you right now, I know kids that the only reason why they continue going to school and trying in class is because they want to play ball. Yep. Right. And staying eligible and having that avenue keeps them off the street. Right. And it keeps them in class, and it keeps them focused on their schoolwork, because they know if they get Fs, they can't play. Right. And so for a lot of kids, that's all they got. Right. And so I've also seen it, if athletics are good, the whole morale of the school improves.
Right. Yep.
So if you've got a team that's going to state, it doesn't matter what team it is, football, volleyball, I've seen wrestling, I've seen baseball, these teams, they go to state, then all of a sudden everyone in school is hype about it. and everybody in school has a good attitude. I don't know of any data on discipline or anything like that, but I'd be willing to say that you probably have less discipline there too, less discipline issues. I shouldn't say less discipline problems in schools when athletics are winning. Like I said, I don't have any data. It's just anecdotal from my experience.
Yeah, and I think even it's probably not a huge difference, but even probably the small local economy is probably also better too, because people are going to the games, they're going out to get food afterwards, they're supporting the school system in some degree or fashion, and that money has to go somewhere, which then eventually in turn goes back to the school. If they're going to watch more games, that's just revenue generated at the end of the day.
I mean,
I witnessed that university, so
I witnessed that at Danville. When I first got hired at Danville, the football team was not good. They won one game. And then the school board, made a change with the football staff. The new staff was a little bit more open to, strength and conditioning. Previous staff was not. And so they hired a new staff. That's right when I started. Casey Woods was his name. He's down in Florida now. But he was the head football coach. He worked out, with the football team. He was that bought in. So whatever we were doing, he was right there doing it with them. So we were squatting, he was squatting, and he worked out right alongside him. Right or wrong, I don't know, but it was great for the time and for the morale of the team. And we went from one win to the very next season, same kids, very next season, we won sectionals. We beat Chittard and won sectionals and went on to regionals and won conference, right? And then the year after that, we went to semi-state. We're probably one quarter away from going to state. We had one bad quarter in that semi-state game, and that's all it took. We lost the game, didn't go to the state championship. But I can tell you, from the perspective of attendance at the games, I mean, when we first started there at Danville, attendance was abysmal. We would look, the student section would be completely empty. The only people there would be moms and dads, and that was it.
Yeah.
So you had, 11 sets of moms and dads, and that was about it that was there. By the time that regional game came around, my second year there, they closed down the entire town. So the entire town closed. So think about that. All the businesses closed that Friday. They decorated the town in Danville High School, football gear, and the entire town showed up at the game. Kickoff, I remember it vividly because I would always start warm-ups at 6 o'clock as a 7 o'clock kickoff. So I showed up at 5:30 for a 6 o'clock warm-up, and it was already standing room only in our stadium.
Wow.
It was a high school stadium, hour and a half before kickoff, and it's already standing room only, and the entire town was closed. So just that level of excitement that you can bring with athletics to a small town like that is unreal.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the last thing I got for you is, what's next for you? Obviously, this is relatively new for you, but I guess, now that you're at Mooresville with a new coaching staff, both sport-wise and sounds like with Coach Graham with you, I guess, what's next for you guys at Mooresville High School?
Well, I mean, we're right now, like I said, we're finishing up football season. What's next for me as far as Mooresville goes is, just continuing for the next, decade or however long, just building Mooresville athletic programs, just kind of taking what they've given us so far. Like I said, the administration has been super supportive of strength and conditioning here, and just continuing to build it to where we can, compete, statewide at every sport. Mooresville has never won a state championship in anything, and our goal is to change that. We even put a big sign on the wall that says who's next, and really it should say who's going to be the first, because our plan is, whoever wins that first state championship is going to get a big plaque up on the wall, and that's going to decorate our weight room. That's where I feel like those trophies should go, because that's where they're earned. So we're continuing to do that. We're just continuing to build the culture that Craig and Chris, previous strength coaches, started with. They did a great job of building that culture. Obviously, you wouldn't have a third of the school in your program and the school shelling out seven figures if they didn't do their part to build that. So we're just going to kind of continue where they left off and, just keep building this monster here. And that's what we're doing.
Awesome, man. That sounds great. Well, I know, I'm sure we'll probably see you at some point, whether it be, powerlifting meet, Mooresville coming. I think you guys are in our sectional now. Is that right?
I'm not for sure. Honestly, I've been kind of drinking out of the fire hose since I got to Mooresville. So
I think it's Franklin and Whiteland. I think you guys were. I think now they moved the sectionals around last year or 2 years ago or whatever it was. So I don't even know who all they are in there now. I know Whiteland is for sure, but I'm not sure about you guys.
Whiteland's 5A and we're 4A, so I don't know.
Okay.
So we might be in a different sectional. I'm not for sure.
Yeah, we're 5A. So
what's that?
So our football's 5A.
Yeah, so we're 4A, so we would be in a different section. So you guys are even bigger than Mooresville.
Yeah, I would say North and South are about the same size as you guys. I think North is a little bigger this year. They had a big incoming freshman class. South ran into that issue last year. They let the kids bounce around between schools pretty, I don't want to say liberally, but it's not as strict as it should be. So kids bounce around between the schools a little bit more. But they're both around the same size as you guys. I don't know why they're not 4A, but they've just been 5A for however long. I mean, they used to be 6A with Senator Grove and all them. When I was in high school, that's who I competed against in wrestling for those schools. So they definitely moved out of what they should have been in. I agree with that, but I think they could even be 4A and based on their size. But who knows?
Yeah, I think they're going to restructure that in the next year or two. Because Whiteland will definitely move up to 6A, but they're 2,500 students. But that's what we continue to do. I took some time off from powerlifting, as you and I have talked about, while I was focusing on, being a backup tire changer and all that on the pit crews. And so wasn't able to, focus, on powerlifting. I was still training, but as far as squatting, benching, and deadlifting, I took a little time off from doing those specific lifts. But now that I'm back to working at the high school level, I feel like I can implement those back into my own training. So I've been doing that. And I'll probably look into, getting into a meet in the spring. I'd love to do one sooner than that, but I just don't think I'm ready to. And I'm the kind of person that if I'm going to compete, I want to be at my best and not just go compete for the sake of doing that. So I want to give myself a little time to get back and to get some respectable numbers back up there everywhere I can go do that, go back into doing that. So that's the goal for me right now.
Cool. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you being on, Jason. Good catching up with you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Take care, man.
All right. See you again.